The unconscious contracts we make in relationships. Carl Jung's hidden truth. Every relationship you enter, whether romantic, friendship, or family, involves an invisible contract that neither party consciously negotiates or signs. These unconscious agreements, identified and analyzed by Carl Jung, govern the deepest dynamics of human connection and often determine whether relationships thrive or slowly disintegrate under the weight of unmet expectations and unspoken resentments. Jung discovered that beneath every conscious relationship exists a shadow relationship, a complex web of unconscious expectations, projections, and psychological needs that operate entirely outside our awareness. These unconscious contracts are written not in words, but in the language of the psyche, using symbols, emotions, and archetypal patterns that have shaped human relationships for millennia. Understanding these hidden agreements isn't just intellectually fascinating. It's essential for anyone who wants to build authentic, lasting connections with others. When unconscious contracts remain unconscious, they create confusion, conflict, and disappointment. When brought into awareness, they become the foundation for genuine intimacy and mutual understanding. Jung's insights reveal that most relationship problems aren't actually about what people think they're about. The fight about dirty dishes isn't really about cleanliness. It's about feeling valued and respected. The argument about spending time with friends isn't about social preferences. It's about security and abandonment fears. These surface conflicts mask the deeper unconscious agreements that truly govern our relationships. The architecture of unconscious contracts. Jung understood that unconscious contracts form through a complex interaction of personal history, archetypal patterns, and psychological projections. Unlike conscious agreements that we discuss and negotiate, these contracts are signed through emotional resonance, mutual projections, and the unconscious recognition of psychological compatibility or complementarity. The projection mechanism. At the heart of every unconscious contract lies what Jung called projection, the unconscious process of seeing our own rejected or undeveloped psychological content in others. When you meet someone and feel an immediate connection, you're often recognizing not them as they truly are, but aspects of your own psyche reflected back to you. This projection creates the initial contract in the relationship. I'll see you as my missing piece if you'll see me as yours. Both parties unconsciously agree to carry certain psychological functions for each other, creating a sense of completion and wholeness that feels like destiny or perfect compatibility. The problem arises when projections inevitably begin to break down. The person you thought was your perfect complement turns out to be a complex individual with their own needs, fears, and limitations. This is when many relationships hit their first major crisis, the discovery that the other person isn't who you unconsciously contracted them to be. The parent-child contract. One of the most common unconscious contracts Jung identified is what we might call the parent-child contract. This occurs when one person unconsciously agrees to be the parent figure while the other takes the role of the child. This contract often forms when one partner has unmet childhood needs for nurturing, protection, or guidance, while the other has unmet needs to feel needed, important, or in control. The child position involves unconscious agreements like, I'll let you take care of me if you'll make me feel safe and secure. I'll be charming and appreciative if you'll handle the adult responsibilities. I'll make you feel important and needed if you'll protect me from life's difficulties. I'll be spontaneous and fun if you'll provide structure and stability. The parent position involves agreements like, I'll take care of everything if you'll make me feel wise and capable. I'll solve your problems if you'll validate my competence and strength. I'll provide security if you'll make me feel indispensable. I'll guide and protect you if you'll never leave me. This contract can work temporarily, but it inevitably creates resentment. The child eventually feels controlled and infantilized, while the parent feels burdened and unappreciated. Both parties signed up for something that prevents authentic adult partnership from developing. The savior-victim contract. Another common unconscious agreement Jung observed is the savior-victim dynamic. This contract forms when one person's psychological identity is built around rescuing others, while the other person's identity involves being rescued or helped. The savior position includes agreements like, I'll fix your problems if you'll make me feel valuable and important. I'll sacrifice my needs for yours if you'll prove that I'm a good person. I'll be strong for both of us if you'll validate my identity as helpful and caring. I'll never abandon you if you'll never stop needing me. The victim position involves agreements like, I'll need your help if you'll take responsibility for my happiness. I'll be grateful and dependent if you'll protect me from consequences. I'll validate your goodness if you'll solve my problems. I'll make you feel necessary if you'll prevent me from having to grow. This contract is particularly toxic because it prevents both parties from developing into whole, functional adults. The savior becomes addicted to being needed and may unconsciously sabotage their partner's growth to maintain their role. The victim becomes addicted to being rescued and may unconsciously create crises to ensure continued attention and care. The performance contract. Jung also identified what we might call the performance contract, an unconscious agreement where both parties agree to perform idealized versions of themselves rather than reveal their authentic selves. This contract is based on mutual fear of rejection and the belief that love is conditional on meeting certain standards. Common performance agreements. I'll be the perfect partner if you'll never criticize or reject me. I'll hide my flaws and problems if you'll do the same. I'll always be positive and supportive if you'll never burden me with negative emotions. I'll be sexually available if you'll provide security and commitment. I'll be successful and impressive if you'll make me look good to others. This contract creates relationships that look perfect from the outside, but feel hollow and exhausting from within. Both parties are performing rather than being authentic, which prevents genuine intimacy from developing. The relationship becomes a mutual admiration society based on false personas rather than real people. The shadow contract. Perhaps Jung's most important insight about relationships concerns what he called the shadow contract, the unconscious agreement to help each other avoid confronting rejected aspects of personality. The shadow contains all the traits, emotions, and potentials that we've deemed unacceptable and banished from conscious awareness. In relationships, we often unconsciously seek partners who will either express our shadow for us so we don't have to, help us suppress our shadow by validating our persona, serve as a target for projecting our shadow onto. Shadow projection contracts. The emotional expression contract. I'll be calm and rational if you'll express all the emotions for both of us. This allows the rational partner to avoid confronting their own emotional nature, while the emotional partner gets to avoid developing rational thinking skills. The responsibility contract. I'll be the responsible one if you'll be carefree and spontaneous. The responsible partner gets to feel superior while avoiding their own need for play and freedom. The carefree partner gets to avoid adult responsibilities while the responsible partner carries the burden. The aggressive expression contract. I'll be peaceful and accommodating if you'll handle all the conflict and confrontation. This allows the peaceful partner to avoid owning their aggressive instincts, while the confrontational partner may take on more conflict than is healthy. These shadow contracts create complementary dysfunction where both parties remain psychologically incomplete, using the relationship to avoid personal growth and shadow integration. The anima and animus contracts. Jung's concepts of anima, the feminine aspect in men's unconscious, and animus, the masculine aspect in women's unconscious, create some of the most powerful unconscious contracts in romantic relationships. The anima projection contract. When a man projects his anima onto a woman, he unconsciously contracts her to embody his emotional and intuitive side, connect him to his feelings and inner life, provide meaning, inspiration, and soulful connection, serve as his muse and source of creativity, handle all emotional labor in the relationship. In return, he unconsciously agrees to provide logical thinking and practical solutions, protect her from the harsh realities of the world, make rational decisions for both of them, handle anything requiring assertiveness or confrontation. The animus projection contract. When a woman projects her animus onto a man, she unconsciously contracts him to embody her assertive and rational side, connect her to power and achievement in the world, provide direction, purpose, and intellectual stimulation, serve as her champion and protector, handle all logical decision-making. In return, she unconsciously agrees to provide emotional warmth and nurturing, create a beautiful, harmonious environment, support his ambitions and ego, handle relationship maintenance and social connections. These contracts can create intensely romantic relationships that feel like perfect completion, but they prevent both parties from developing their own inner masculine and feminine qualities. The relationship becomes a mutual projection system rather than a connection between two whole individuals. The trauma bond contract. Jung recognized that many intense relationships are actually based on shared trauma or complementary wounds. These unconscious contracts involve agreeing to recreate familiar patterns of pain, abandonment, or dysfunction because they feel like home to the psyche. Common trauma bond agreements. I'll abandon you before you abandon me if you'll confirm my belief that I'm unlovable. I'll be unavailable and withholding if you'll chase me and prove your devotion. I'll sacrifice everything for you if you'll validate my worthiness through your need. I'll be dramatic and crisis-prone if you'll rescue me and prove you care. I'll be critical and rejecting if you'll keep trying harder to win my approval. These contracts create relationships with intense highs and lows that feel passionate and meaningful, but are actually driven by familiar trauma patterns rather than genuine love and compatibility. Breaking free from unconscious contracts. Jung believed that recognizing and renegotiating unconscious contracts was essential for authentic relationships and personal growth. This process involves several key steps. Making the unconscious conscious. The first step is becoming aware of the unconscious agreements operating in your relationships. This requires examining relationship patterns. Look for recurring themes across your relationships. Do you always end up in the caretaker role? Do you repeatedly attract partners who need rescuing? Do you find yourself performing rather than being authentic? Identifying emotional triggers. Pay attention to moments of intense emotional reaction in relationships. These often signal that an unconscious contract is being violated or activated. Exploring family patterns. Many unconscious contracts are modeled on childhood relationships with parents or siblings. Understanding these early patterns can illuminate current relationship dynamics. Shadow work. Identifying what you project onto others reveals aspects of yourself that you've rejected or failed to develop. Withdrawing projections. Jung emphasized that healthy relationships require withdrawing projections and seeing others as they truly are rather than as carriers of your psychological content. This involves taking responsibility for your own emotions rather than expecting others to manage them, developing rejected aspects of your personality instead of seeking them in others, accepting others' complexity and autonomy rather than trying to mold them into ideal roles. Learning to meet your own psychological needs instead of making others responsible for them. Renegotiating conscious agreements. Once unconscious contracts are brought to awareness, they can be consciously renegotiated based on authentic needs and desires rather than unconscious projections and fears. This process involves honest communication about actual needs and expectations, setting boundaries that support individual growth and authenticity, creating agreements that serve both parties' genuine development, regularly checking in and adjusting agreements as people grow and change, developing individual wholeness. Jung believed that healthy relationships could only exist between individuals who were committed to their own psychological development and individuation. This means taking responsibility for your own happiness and fulfillment, developing both masculine and feminine qualities within yourself, integrating shadow aspects rather than projecting them onto others, maintaining individual identity and interests within relationships, supporting your partner's individual growth even when it challenges you. The conscious relationship. When unconscious contracts are brought to light and renegotiated, relationships can evolve into what Jung might call conscious partnerships, connections between two individuals who see each other clearly and choose to support each other's authentic development. Conscious relationships are characterized by acceptance of each other's complexity and humanity, support for individual growth and self-discovery, honest communication about needs, fears, and desires, shared commitment to awareness and personal development, ability to work through conflicts without losing respect or love, balance between intimacy and autonomy, recognition that love is a choice rather than just a feeling. These relationships may be less immediately intense than projection-based connections, but they offer something far more valuable: genuine intimacy between authentic individuals who choose each other consciously rather than unconsciously. Jung's hidden truth about unconscious contracts reveals that most relationships begin with mutual self-deception and projection. But this isn't necessarily a problem. It's often the starting point for deep psychological work that can lead to genuine love and authentic connection. The key is recognizing when you're relating to projections rather than people and having the courage to see and be seen as you truly are. This process isn't easy, but it's the only path to relationships that truly nourish and support your authentic self rather than just maintaining comfortable illusions. By understanding and renegotiating the unconscious contracts that govern your connections with others, you can create relationships that serve your highest development and deepest fulfillment.